And welcome everyone to today's DX Cafe event, Personalization, Orchestration, and the Composable DXP. I'm Matthew McQueenie from Conabos. If you have any thoughts as we move along and before we open the floor towards the end, as I mentioned, you can put them in the Zoom chat. We'll monitor that if there's anywhere to jump in. If you have a really dying to ask something or make a point, I'm not going to be offended if you jump in. But if you just mute yourselves in the interim, I know many of us working from home have kids around, so if you hear something in the back, that's what's going on here. But again, joining us today is Sana Remekie, CEO of Conscia, and a newly minted MACH Alliance ambassador. MACH, for those who might not know, stands for Microservices-Based, API-First, Cloud-Native SaaS, and Headless. It's kind of everything that's going on right now. On the Conscia end, that is it's a company that is a composable API-first personalization and experience orchestration engine. That's a mouthful. I'm going to ask a few people to say it 5 times. So this will be a great discussion because, at least in my opinion, personalization is one of those magical subjects today, as is the topic of Composable DXP. So welcome, Sana. Thank you for being with us today. If you would, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how your background has led you up to this esteemed event today?
Yes, I can do that. And thank you so much, Matt, for having me here. It's a pleasure to have a chat with all of you about composability and personalization. So the background that actually got me here is not as straightforward as you would think. So I'm an engineer by trade from University of Waterloo. I did my system design engineering back in 2006. I started my career at Sapient, now known as Publicis Sapient, as a technology consultant. So initially, when I joined, I was, of course, just a junior associate tech consultant, thrown into the ocean with some really, really big accounts like Walmart and Oxford University Press, a lot of the e-commerce focused accounts. And that's actually where I met Dwayne, my husband, and also the CTO of the company. And, we worked on a bunch of different projects together. And really all we talked about all the time was data and integration and how to solve the customers' problems who had all the various monolithic platforms like the Adobes of the world, Salesforce, SAPs, etc. And we were really our job was to customize and integrate and help them build their technology stacks because we were the consultants. And, on the side, Dwayne and I would always talk about how it's crazy that these really, really big companies can't seem to get anything done with these really, heavy duty, all-in-one solutions. And we spoke about how the biggest problem was the data silos. You were not able to really access the data or the content very easily with any of these systems. And that was kind of at the back of our mind as we moved through our journey to various companies together. After Sapient, we actually joined Indeka, which is a search platform, which eventually ended up getting consumed into the big red sea of Oracle. But that's actually, I would say, the basis of where the ideas around orchestration and data aggregation came into being in our minds. And what the problem that Indeka really solves is around search and discoverability of content, right? So, and the way Indeka does that, and a lot of other search platforms do that, is by aggregating all of the content coming from various data sources into a single index, and then you serve the content to the various channels from that one index. And we loved Indeka. We were, so excited that here now we can actually take all of this data and content out of these siloed systems, put it in one place, and we can actually serve it from this one place, and we don't have to worry about the fact that you can't have that data accessible through APIs or through more real-time means in all of these backend platforms like the Adobes and Salesforces of the world. But one thing, as we were working on a bunch of different implementations for really large companies, one thing we realized was that even though we can get put a search engine on top of all of this data, the problem is not solved because it's garbage in, garbage out. If you don't get the right data from these systems into, oh, did somebody say something?
Sorry, I didn't think my mic was on. Yeah, I was saying, oh my God, you have the same problem I have.
That's awesome. Okay, good to hear. Right, so it's a garbage in, garbage out problem, right? And so we thought, search is great, and this is a good way of solving some of the problems, but there's more to it than that. And so we actually, after Endeca, we both actually joined another company, which was also a search company, but we thought that we would be able to influence their roadmap to tackle the actual underlying issue, which was the quality of the data itself, and build something that would allow non-technical users to actually enhance the metadata of the platform and build something that would sit on top of any search engine and basically enhance the quality of the content, optimize the quality of the content for the purpose of better search and better discoverability. We did that, but it didn't end up working out in our favor. We didn't get to influence the roadmap and the strategy that we thought we would be able to. So Dwayne and I both left and created our own company, Conscia. So the very first product that we actually worked on at Conscia was what we now call the DX Graph. At that time, we actually called it View. And View was, the idea behind View was that we would create a single view of all of the content and data across all systems that were in operation, and allow for a single point of access to non-technical users so they could go in and enhance and enrich that data themselves. And so we would provide, we provided tools like natural language processing, data cleansing tools, data enrichment tools, AI, to make the quality of that metadata better. And it would feed into search platforms. And in fact, we actually had an implementation of Elasticsearch under the hood as well. If they chose to, if the customer chose to go with Elasticsearch, we didn't really care what the search engine was. We were really just responsible for getting the data prepared for that. Now, as we were going through that journey, and the product was gaining traction and we were doing well, but what ended up happening is that we started to see the rise of Contentfuls of the world, and Content Stack, and BigCommerce, and commerce tools. And this thought came to our mind that, if we just take the content and the data out of these systems, we're not really fully leveraging the actual delivery mechanisms of the platforms, like those headless platforms, such as Contentful. We're simply just using them now as a data repository, rather than a platform that actually delivers content to the front end. So that's where the idea of the second product came into play, which is the DX Engine, which is responsible for doing real-time orchestration of content and data from the systems, from the source systems themselves, rather than pulling the data out of those systems into one place and then serving it from there, right? So basically, that's how we came up with the Conscia DX Engine, which you described earlier as the personalization and orchestration platform for composable DX stacks. Okay, sorry. So that was a mouthful.
No,
that's kind of the background.
Great. No, that was love those entrepreneurial pathways, right? You kind of landed on a solution here. Why don't we start? Let's go back to the basics, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you a real easy one for you, right? What is personalization?
Okay, so personalization in the most basic form is the ability to put the right content in front of the right customer at the right time. And there are three components of personalization, right? So you have the customer, and you know something about the customer, right? Such as what their browsing history, their preferences, their psychographic information, demographic information. Then you have content that you want to present to the customer, right? And that content has a very broad definition. It could be products that you're presenting to them, promotions, it could be blogs, articles, banners on a landing page. It could literally be anything that you can imagine that the customer will consume. And then there's the context of the customer. And the context is the real-time understanding of their intent, their location, their device, what channel they're coming in from, all of those types of things. And in order to personalize the experience for the customer, you need to really connect the dots between the 3 C's that you have on this slide, right? You have the customer, content, and context all coming together, and you need an engine that has the ability to do that all in real time. Now, the biggest difference between the way we do personalization and the way some of our competitors do personalization is that the content that you're looking at here, we are not pulling that into a single repository first and serving that content from there. We're leaving the content where it originates from and accessing it in real time. The engine is able to orchestrate the queries to customer data, understand take in the context in real time, and then call out to those content sources in real time and bring it all together and serve it to the front end.
Very nice. So for me, when I think of personalization, I immediately think about my Netflix queue and my Amazon feed, Google and Facebook algorithms. I've also come to learn how much having little kids can ruin my hard-built personalized experience on Spotify. I'm getting a lot of Coco Melon and Encanto. But in the particular enterprise segment that we tend to work within, when we're talking about CMSs, commerce systems, for instance, can you walk us through how personalization actually works within those?
Right. So I think what you're showing here is what I believe to be the right way of doing personalization. There are wrong ways of doing personalization as well. But first of all, I'm going to go through what I believe is the way it should be done, right? So in large enterprises, you have content and data that is scattered across the organization in different systems, right? So you have your content management and digital asset management systems, such as Contentful or Content Stack or Cloudinary. You have your commerce engines, some monolith, some headless, right? So it depends on what kind of organization you're dealing with. You may even have multiple commerce engines within the organization, such as, you have a BigCommerce or Salesforce implementation in other parts of the organization as well. You have your search, right? A lot of times people think that search itself is an orchestration platform. And for all the reasons that I just spoke about earlier, I believe search is actually just another data source, which, yes, it can sit on top of other systems in an offline sort of setting. You can index a bunch of data and put it into a search index. But at the end of the day, what search platform itself is providing to that next layer above it is data. It's data that's queried in a certain way. Sorry, just 1 second. I'm getting a call here, which I need to decline. Anyway, and then you have customer data, right? So customer data could also be, some companies have a CDP already in place, so customer data platform that's already aggregated all of the customer data into into one single view of the customer. Others have not started on that initiative yet, so the data may still be sitting in a user database. It may be sitting in, some of it may be in the Adobe Audience Manager for segmentation, and again, just scattered across multiple backend systems. Now, that in my mind is what we call a composable tech stack. Whether you have monolithic systems in play and headless platforms in play, all of them together, because there are a multitude of them, we are talking about a composable tech stack at this point, right? Or composed at the very least, if not composable. It's all coming together. Now, what you need to do in order to present that data or that content to the customer in real time is orchestrate all of that content and data together, right? So that middle layer that we're speaking about here, experience orchestration and personalization, that should have the ability to connect to any headless or API first backend in real time. It should have the ability to coordinate data and content across multiple sources. So I'm going to stop on that one for a second and double click on that. So when we talk about coordination of data and content, what does that mean, right? So you may have your customer data sitting in segment, right? That's your CDP. You have your content sitting in, let's say, content.ai or Contentful. Now, you need to be able to pull the customer profile in real time from the segment platform, and based on what you see in the profile, present the right content from Contentful or content.ai or content stack to the customer, right? So that requires coordination, right? There are two systems involved just in that one small example that are required to be coordinated by the orchestration engine. The third very important thing that it needs to be able to do is give control to the marketing team. With the composable DXPs, what has happened is that the marketers lost control over the end user experience, over what the customer should see in real time. That control has now been relegated to the developers, right? So we need the orchestration platform to be able to provide that level of control to the marketing team so that they can decide what kind of content is relevant to what kind of customer in real time. And if there is AI involved, and we can talk about that later as well, there should still be control over artificial intelligence ways to present that content to the customer, right? Fourth, because it's so central to the overall platform or the overall stack, the orchestration engine should be able to create a 360-degree view of the customer. Now, it's going to depend on where you are in your implementation of orchestration and personalization. If there's only one channel that you're controlling at the beginning, it can't, of course, create the full 360 view of the customer, but that should be the roadmap, right? It's the idea is for it to eventually provide a single view of the customer so that any channel that the customer is interacting with the brand on can use that one 360 view. So essentially a CDP without calling it a CDP, okay? Unified Experience API, right? So because this orchestration layer should be completely agnostic of the front end, it needs to be able to instruct the front end on what the customer should see, what content the customer should see through an API in a completely headless fashion. And it should not care about what that front end platform is or how that front end platform is using that API, right? It needs to be completely agnostic, unopinionated about the look and feel of the content. Okay, and then just a couple more things. It can act as a gateway, an API gateway, so it should allow for optimization of the content structure before the content gets to the front end. And then finally, we know we're living in the world of legacy systems and monolith platforms, so it has to have some story, some way of working with those systems as well. Okay, so that is the role. It's a very extensive role. It is very, very central to the overall stack. Personalization is just one of the use cases. The experience engine goes beyond just personalization.
Great. So this might be a very silly question, but there's probably a lot of our non-US friends who look at the way personalization is written here and are hurt by it. I know it's way beyond that. We're talking AI, but based on where you are in the world, will it put the word personalization the way it's supposed to? With an S or a Z?
It should be able to do that. Absolutely. It should be able to do that. Depends on how your data is structured and how your content is modeled, but yes, for sure it should be.
That's great. So we said the API should be unopinionated, but let's be a little opinionated here about this. So you speak and write a lot on the delineation between legacy monolith systems and composable DXP. You put a lot of great thought leadership out there on LinkedIn about this. I kind of copped a few of those things here. And I'd love if you could just kind of talk through some of these graphics plus what the differences are between those two systems from your vantage point.
So monolith versus composable. So I created this little mind map of all of the various terms that, buzzwords really that you hear about in this space, in the monolith and composable space. And, there's a lot of arguments about what's the right way, right? Is monolith like one all-in-one solution the right way? Is composable the right way? But my thought on this, the biggest thought I have on this is why not first agree on terminology? Why not first understand what we're talking about before we start to argue? Because a lot of times people are talking about two different things and they're arguing about something that's not meaningful if you're not on the same page about definitions and terminology, right? So the way I actually presented this in a session before was I zoomed in on each term, right? So I said, okay, let's start with, traditional. What does traditional mean, or what does monolith mean? And then kind of go outward from there, rather than talk about it as a whole. This is just a full mind map, but let's focus in on one term at a time, right? So let's go to monolith because that's what your slide title is. We're comparing those two things. So a monolith may be a composable platform. Okay, so it could actually be composable. They're not mutually exclusive from each other. A monolith just means that there's one platform that has a bunch of different capabilities, right? It has content authoring, content design capabilities. It has experience management. It has personalization. It may even have a CDP, right? So monolith in itself doesn't mean that it's not built the right way. So in a way, you can't really say monolith versus composable. You could be a monolith and composable platform. So, and what that means then, if a monolith is composable, is that it is built from a bunch of components that are integrated with each other in a composable fashion, in a headless or API first fashion, right? So that's the definition of composable is it it's built on open and decoupled architecture. It is headless, right? Each component is headless. And traditionally, composable platforms, traditional platforms typically don't have those APIs. And that's why there's a delineation between traditional versus composable, but not monolith versus composable in this picture. Does that sort of make sense at a high level?
Absolutely. And I think from that one, the other one I like here is walking through from this end, because that might help break those, break those differences down a little differently.
Yeah, definitely. So this is basically from left to right, the transition from the old to the new world, right? So the old world was you have a web CMS or a traditional DXP, such as an Adobe Experience Manager or Salesforce Experience Cloud or Marketing Cloud. And what used to happen in the past when we were not in the world of composable was that your content management and experience delivery were tightly coupled with each other. The same people that were writing content were the ones who were also responsible for what that content should look like to the customer, right? Then came headless, right? So when Contentful comes in, Content Stack comes in, and they say, you know what? We are now not just dealing with the web. We have all these other touch points, such as mobile and email and chatbots and AR and VR. We need to be able to write content once and reuse it all over the place. So we need to separate those two things in a way that content can be reused across all channels, and content should become unopinionated about the way that content should be displayed, or where it's displayed, or why it's displayed to the front end, right? So that's where that second layer or that transition to headless and decoupled world came into play. Now, what happened with that transition is that the marketing team lost control over who sees what, when, and where, because they're basically forced into the world of just content management. You stay down there, you just tell us what the content is, and the developers will build the front end experience. They will build the templates, and they will hard code the logic of what is seen when and where right into the front end, right into the head of the overall platform. They became the head, essentially, right? And so marketing is still very, very frustrated about that, and they really should be frustrated, because they're the ones who really understand the customer. They're the ones who know what's the right thing to show to the right customer at the right time. And if they have to go through a whole cycle of communication with the developers to let them know upfront, before the site is launched, what their customer needs to be able to see, and they don't have that day by day kind of continuous control over the experience delivery, that would be very frustrating, and it just slows down innovation, and you're losing out on your competition, right? So at the final stage, now that we have Composable, this is more of a proposal of the way things should be and the way we've built our platform to kind of come in and solve the problem of marketing and business teams. We are continuing with the concept of headless content sources. So you have your CMS1, that one should be CMS2. I don't know why it says CMS1 as well. Commerce engine, search, digital asset management, PIMS. We have to recognize that content is not just coming from one system anymore, right? And you also have an omni-channel presence. You have content that needs to appear in a whole bunch of different places. So what that now requires is control by the marketing teams on who sees what, when and where, and from what system. Not just when and where, but where's that content? They should know where that content is, and they should be able to control how that content makes its way to the front end, and in what context it makes its way to the front end, right? So we're basically, we're differentiating between, maybe I should say it this way. We used to have this idea of a head and the content. Now the head has two pieces. One is what the face is, right? Which is the visual layer, what you actually see. And then there's the brain, right? The brain of that sits within the head that actually controls what content is seen by the customer, right? So we're further delineating between those two things in the new world.
So this is great. I thought maybe we'll take just a moment here. I saw Dennis. Would you want to ask your question a little here, because I think we have a slide on why orchestration is so important to this, that actual word, and the fact that composable, headless, the untethered realities of that means orchestration is almost vital. But Dennis, did you want to say it, or should we just go right off of your chat there? I thought it would be a good interjection.
Sure. I'm happy to say that. So yeah, I mean, I had recently heard from some other folks that, hey, composable is just a buzzword. It's nothing new because we've been integrating with best of breed systems for ages. So I've been doing composable already, and I wonder what you have to say to that. Is composable DXP a legit thing, or is it just yet another buzzword that the cool kids are trying to use to sell product? And secondly, here in this diagram, the one thing that I note here and before in the slides is how this intelligence and orchestration layer stands out as different. Is that in your mind a key kind of differentiator of composable DXP from the previous approaches, and how does that relate to the people who had said before we're integrating with everything, so we were always composable?
Right. So composable is definitely a real thing. It's just a different word for a thing that has always been the case. Or maybe I should say that composed was always the reality in large organizations, right? So you always had different types of applications coming together and integrating with each other in one way or another, whether or not it was done through APIs and zero code type of orchestration. Or large organizations have more than one product that they're working with, right? The difference now is that what we're saying is that composable DXPs or composable tech stacks should be built a certain way, and that each component within the composable tech stack should have certain characteristics that make it easy to integrate with everybody else, right? So we're really just specifying or qualifying certain technologies to be future-proof, essentially, right? And I think that is the biggest difference. It's I don't like to get too stuck with terminology. It's more about the idea. What is the right thing to do? And we know as DX practitioners that certain technologies are easier to work with than others. And the ones that are easier typically are, in terms of an integration at the very least, are the ones that have APIs, have ways to connect to other technologies, etc. That experience intelligence and orchestration layer in the old world, in the web CMS and the traditional DXP world, was that coupling between the content management and experience delivery. And it was hard coded right into the platform, and it couldn't be really reused anywhere else, right? So if you brought in, let's say if you're working with Adobe has a certain way of presenting information, certain way of personalizing, which works very well within their own ecosystem. But as soon as you go and bring in another technology, it's hard to integrate with it, right? In fact, some of our customers are switching over to a headless CMS, but they still have an Adobe Experience Manager as the platform for delivery, and all. They have a hard time making those two things work together, right? So what we're doing with experience intelligence and orchestration is allowing all of the various types of technologies to work better together and have that central point of control for marketing, and it gives marketing and business users a choice to work with whatever platform or whatever technology or vendor they want to be able to.
Great. I'm going to jump a little bit, Sana, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we did, I think it did obviously a great job in the pitch of assimilating a lot of the slide-by-slide things we had. One that really sticks out for me is it's often noted that the web channel is still the primary front-end destination for most cases. However, the headless marketplace always touts the benefit of omni-channel delivery. And I'm just wondering if there's a best example that you've come across that really shows maximal omni-channel touch points and orchestration, I guess you would say. I'm just more not questioning it, but just it's one of those things, is the reality of all of the ability of these different touch points happening out there yet?
So I think it is, and I think it's still slow because not because people don't want to do it. It's because they are stuck in the old ways, and to transition from the old to new, a lot of times, it just takes time. One of the customers that we're actually working with right now, a very large hardware retailer here in Canada, is actually doing true omni-channel experience delivery, and what they're actually doing. So they have a web application, right? So website, basically. They have a mobile app. They want to be able to send emails at certain points in the customer's journey. So that's a third channel. They have stores. They have 1,000 stores that they want to be able to use the same intelligence, the personalization and the intelligence about the customer to offer real-time promotions and real-time discounts and offers to their customers at the POS. So POS, although an offline channel, they want to be able to use the same logic and the orchestration that we're doing on all these other channels, along with a single view of the customer, to really give the right experience to their customers while they're in store. They also have kiosks in store where you can actually log in to your account and see product recommendations and content or promotions that are more relevant to that user. So there are organizations that are thinking about omni-channel and definitely going down that path. But I agree that 80 to 90% of the web is still very much single channel, and you sometimes wonder, why are we saying that we care about omni-channel at all, right? Because you don't see that all the time. You don't experience that, but it's going there. That's at least from what I see in all my conversations. Everybody wants to do it, but is having a hard time getting there.
Absolutely. Cam just has a chat item here. Cam, are you in a place where you want to speak to that, or you want me to read it off?
Sure, you can read it off.
We'll do. I have the good mic. All right, great. So Cam says the best example that he's seen of the true omni-channel is EA Games. Yeah, gaming's a great example. They deliver in gameplay content to players to help them. Right. So if they're stuck on a specific level, then they will give them different hints based on where they are stuck. All the content is driven from a headless CMS, which also drives other screens within the game. Yeah, that's kind of the original second screen, kind of, right? The video game experience. That's a great example.
Makes sense.
Onto this one here. I'm real interested in this as somebody who tries to explain concepts to customers, to prospects, to friends. And I imagine for you that it's daily that you speak, pitch, and refine your presentation about the Conscia platform with decision makers. Do you find that your job is more of a chief education officer than an executive officer?
Yes, when it comes to sales, I find that most of my time is actually spent explaining the why, and the how of our platform to our potential customers, even to our partners. right? This space is very new still, I would say, or this idea of composability, even though, as I said, we've always had multiple platforms working together. This whole idea of the right way to compose applications and orchestrate all of these applications together is still very, very new to people. So yes, absolutely. I would say most of my time is spent in educating people about what orchestration means and why you got to do it this way.
Now this interests me, right? Because Composable DXP does feel like an optimal business state, but you can also see where the pitch from a monolith provides some level of comfort, even if you can't deliver it all. Oh, everything in one platform. When you're kind of on the ground speaking in this world so intensely, are there general pain points that you hear from customers and prospects when discussing headless and composable? And how do you answer those? I mean, is it the old choice conundrum where it's like there's so many things to think about that it's hard to really center in on one thing? Like, what do you come across with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes back to the definition or that graphic that I showed earlier, where you had content management and experience delivery on all the various channels. When they were all coupled together, the marketing folks can go into this one system and see what the content looks like, as well as what it's going to appear to be on all of these different channels. Well, in the past, it used to be only web. Now that's the hard part. When you move to omnichannel and you move to composable, infrastructure, like what am I gonna see in the front end? If I am the user, that preview, the WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, is completely missing. So that is definitely something that we hear a lot about. There's also the pain point of not having a single hand to shake or a single throat to choke, right? If something goes wrong, whose fault was it? Was it the CMS that didn't provide the content? Was that their API? Was it the personalization API? Was it, the headless commerce engine that broke everything? Where was the issue, right? So that's actually one of the things that we're trying to address with experience orchestration, is to give the organizations a single view of all of the systems that it is connecting to. In fact, on our roadmap, which is should be delivered within the next month, is a dashboard of all of the various systems that we're integrating with, all of the backend systems that we're integrating with, and getting a real-time view of what is up and what is down and what the performance is of each system, so that the customer can come to that one single point to see how everything is behaving and where the problems are, right? So that's actually very exciting, but absolutely the right thing to talk about. You need a way. Yes, we're working with distributed systems and a very distributed reality. You still do humans think in like differently. They don't want to think about a chaotic ecosystem where they have no control over anything. They still want to be able to make sense out of where everything is. Yes, it can be distributed, but I want to know what's happening with all of these things that are distributed. So that central line of control is definitely an important thing.
That's great. And not to be in a sales pitchy kind of way, but I'm kind of interested in, Conscia feels like it has the ability to slot in at many points along the customer's composable journey. Do you find there's a best, efficient, more optimal time to start the conversation with you? Is it at the beginning of a move to composable, at a more mature level, somewhere in between, all of it?
I think it's a good question. I think the one thing that we assume when we're talking to people, or when we're reaching out to our target account, is that they have at least made an initial move towards composable. They have maybe selected a CMS or a commerce platform, a commerce engine, and they want to get to the next step of really giving marketing the control over that front end experience in the new way. The control that they have lost, they want to gain that back, and that's where we come in and we provide the intuitive interface to marketing users to be able to control who sees what, when, and on what channel in a very centralized way. Our primary use case, I would say at this point, is personalization, just because it's something that everybody is talking about. And commercially speaking, if we gotta go with where the market is going. And if the market's talking about personalization, and that seems to be the easiest conversation to have, then that's where we start. What we do see, however, is that the conversation expands to beyond personalization very, very quickly. And it gets into orchestration of all of the various components that the organizations may be, or all the different vendors and applications that they may be working with, as almost a second step. And once they learn about all of the capabilities that we have, then we can actually expand the conversation to include it all. But the first step right now is definitely personalization, which comes after having a CMS or at least one other content source in play.
That's great. Again, I'm jumping around. I'm throwing it off a little bit. Keep it fun.
You're keeping me on my toes, right?
Absolutely, keeping you on your toes. So we've shown this quote on each one of the DX Café sessions because it really is a great one. The idea of moving from monolith to composable is a journey, as we've said a lot today. It starts with composable business, composable thinking, before the industry can move on to composable DXP. Now, I talk with Dennis a lot on this. The idea from a resourcing standpoint, as you speak with and work with composable businesses or moving towards composable businesses, how do you see the roles shaking out within these companies? In the past, there might have been a back-end developer, a front-end developer, content writer, SEO, QA. Do you see these roles morphing? Do you see new roles being created because of composable?
I think the one thing that I see in terms of the operating model of businesses in a composable setting is that instead of having siloed teams that are all individually responsible for different parts of the digital experience, such as content authoring and content design and experience management and development and whatnot, or front-end development, what it requires really is everybody to come together and work together towards the same vision. Because if you have the situation where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, it gets exponentially worse with a composable platform, because there's just so many different moving parts that if you're not working together and fully understand all of the different layers of your tech stack and understand how exactly, all these different content sources are going to, influence your experience, or how orchestration is working, for instance, you're just not, it's not going to work, right? So it's not so much that the individual roles and specialties are changing. They could pretty much, in my opinion, stay where they are. But they just have to work more closely together to know what my peer is doing. So for an example of that would be, there's this idea that we talked about with respect to WYSIWYG front ends, right? So marketing wants that control. They want to be able to control what content is seen by who, when, and what that looks like. Right. So in a headless or composable architecture, you come up with a bunch of templates, right, that are going to define that front end experience. Now, if the templates are being defined by marketing, like I want a banner at the top and I want my featured products, and then followed by that, I want a recommendations rail and blah, blah, blah. Both the developer and the marketer need to be very much on the same page about where the input from the marketing team is going to come in, right? Marketing is not necessarily looking to go and change the color scheme every minute or every day. What they're really looking to do is control specific components of the page. So both the developers, the digital team, the marketing team needs to work hand in hand to really define what that overall experience needs to look like and who is in control of what parts of that experience, right? So that requires some coordination and orchestration even within the organization, not just at a technology level, but at an organizational, from a work process standpoint, we need to think about that as well.
That's great. I have some more. I'd love to just, if there's anybody else who wanted to ask questions. I mean, I've been having a great conversation with Sana.
Let's see.
So, yeah, I'll ask one while we're. Oh, there are some. Okay. Let's see.
I think in the chat window, I see some comments here. I'm just wondering if there's a question.
Okay. So I see Brian with a few nice comments here. Brian Lloyd, really like the way you are framing monolith versus composable, and
thank you.
telecom as another example of omnichannel in Canada. So those are good insights. Sana, one thing that I'm interested in all of it, right? But the idea from a product and business point of view, and in this ever-changing world where you're trying to find a place and a position in it, how do you roadmap? Is it like weekly?
So the way we've actually built Conscia from the ground up is that it's a very flexible API first, microservices first platform, and it was built in a way that you could do a lot with the platform in a very zero code kind of way, right? So we've built, you can think of it as like Lego blocks. We've built all the Lego blocks that we think are gonna cover all of the various types of functions and features that we would want in the future, right? And it's now a matter of us using those Lego blocks to, assemble them in a way that would give us those new features, right? So, the ideas keep on coming. Of course, every time we talk to a new customer or a new partner, they want to do something slightly different, right? So what we've actually tried to do is give our partners and customers also those same Lego blocks so that they can configure the platform in a whole bunch of different ways. So for instance, the engine itself is built with this idea of components, right? And each component could be something that either that either instructs the front end on what content to show, or it could be a logical component that performs a whole bunch of business logic and maybe inputs takes an output from one component and serves it as an input to another component. So those components are really like Lego blocks, and you can, mix and match them and add a whole bunch of logic to them without actually writing code, right? So that's always been our foundation, is to build the thing that helps you build more complex things rather than build those complex things up front, right? So that's been the strategy. We're always, of course, improving the efficiency and the efficacy of each of those individual Lego blocks. But we believe that what we've done with the platform is the right thing right from the start, and build it in a way that is reusable in a whole bunch of different ways and in a whole bunch of different use cases.
That is great. So there's one question that we can handle, I think, probably in a LinkedIn post or even in the chat here. Just what you read and consume on a daily basis to stay up to date on the industry. I mean, I know you're creating a lot of the content that we should stay up to date with, but that might be a really great resource we can provide the the audience so we can be as
Yeah, absolutely.
as
I mean,
smart
my
as you
biggest
on it.
source, I think my biggest source, just like for most people out there, is actually LinkedIn itself. I make sure that I stay on top of, I follow a whole bunch of industry leaders in the space, and just make sure that every day I'm looking through all of the content that's posted at least, once a day. I'm guilty of doing it more often than I should, because I get distracted and have a little bit of ADHD going on. But I definitely stay on top of LinkedIn. That's one. Also look at articles that are posted daily. I get a feed from CMS Wire, from MarTech. What else do we have? Basically, I mean, I start from LinkedIn and then I just kind of spider out and look at all the other the sources that are referenced in one way or another there, and just start to branch out from that point.
Well, that is great. So we'll make sure to follow Sana. I know we're running up against our 1 o'clock here. I just wanted to thank you so much for being on and dispelling your wisdom to the group. And I
Thank you so
also
much.
would like to just quickly note here a couple of our things that we have coming up. Our DX Cafe Toastmasters Club, our executive board is set. Anybody who has interest in the club has received an email, whether they're inside Conobos or outside. But if there are any questions on that, contact our friend Ken Gray, who's on the list here, and his email's right there. And of course, we're always looking for any topics, papers that folks would like to come on and speak to in the DX Cafe, as well as nominating those individuals, groups who you think are doing a great job and you want to pay it forward with a nice word, and we'll put something nice out about them. So I thank everybody here. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt.